All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 9:01. Erica, can you do roll call?
Yes, we have Tom Woody.
Yep.
Arlen Zortman.
Yes.
Josh Dransky.
Here.
Glenn Pepper.
Here.
Jenna Reed. Here. Lauren Selly. Here. Carrie Snow. Here. And then staff, we have Harold Dominguez, Kendra Daniels, and Sarah Arney.
All right.
Holly's walking up.
So let's go on to item number 2, approval of the minutes from our September 12, 2023 meeting. Do I hear a motion? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on this? All right, let's go to vote. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? And then I'm going to abstain since I was not present.
I will as well.
Okay. All right, number 3, public invited to be heard. Anybody from the public? Seeing none? Yeah. Just right across the street, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Excited there.
So let's go on to number 4, organizational updates. Is that going to be Molly? Or should we move?
Thanks, Molly. So we can move to the budget if you want.
Why don't we do that and just give Molly a little bit more time to set up? So we'll be going down to item 6A, items for our input. A is 2024 proposed budget items, general fund forecast.
So, I'm going to go through what we've proposed for the rent increases. The first, and I want to change the language on this based on some things that were flying around via email yesterday. For the Hearthstone and the Lodge, we're technically not doing a rent increase for the tenants. It's more of requesting additional federal assistance. The tenants would never really receive an increase unless there is a change in their Social Security or their income. You know, if Social Security goes up and they're getting 3% more, then they're getting 3% more rent-wise. So technically, the 8.95 and the 6.86 is we're directly asking HUD to give us additional federal assistance. We have submitted it. They have not been approved yet, and I have I don't know if that did shut down. But if it's scheduled or at some point, that will affect the decision. And usually what happens is our contract date is on a contract date. So when they approve it, whether it's in February of 2024, which has happened, they do let us go back and do the gross rent adjustment as of the contract date. But LHA might have to front fund money for a while for some of the vendors until we last year they were pretty sticklers about us only getting 4%, so I don't know if they'll improve these increases, but hopefully they're seeing the same increases across the board for all agencies as well. The next is we propose a 5% rental increase for the rest of the properties, and that's because we are seeing a 5% increase, if not more, from all other vendors, like from service contracts, from anything like that. We're expecting a pretty large increase. We have some pretty large increases coming through utilities. Stormwater's one. We have gas that actually wasn't expected in the budget last year to increase, so we had to increase that plus add some additional, because a lot of the times we don't know what the gas. I've asked the city how do we find out the gas increases, and usually it's until they get published that they have to go through this whole process. So that's what we're expecting. And once again, and we do have people that are already got the tax credit rent. So if the tax credit doesn't increase that 5%, these tenants won't receive a 5% increase. They would only receive an increase up to that tax credit rent. So the tax credit only increases 3%. Then that's what they would see.
That's on an individual basis, right?
It is on an individual basis, and it's all depending on how long they've been here. If they were here pre-COVID and weren't getting increases, they're probably not on the tax credit because the tax credit rate kept increasing, but we didn't institute any increases.
How does this affect people that are
It would affect them if their income changes.
Okay.
So it's similar to, if you're on a voucher, it's similar to getting more federal assistance. And you're only gonna pay the AMI that's required for that voucher, that's allowed. But if your income changes, that's when it fluctuates.
So it could, I mean, indirectly allow, we would have less vouchers possibly in the future to pay out if we have to increase the vouchers in order to pay for this 5% increase, right?
Well, so we'll increase the vouchers to the current market rent.
Okay,
Is
yeah,
what we'll do,
Right.
and that's what we're budgeting for.
Yeah.
But, and so we do that on, I should say, we budget for that on the PDD side, because those are our vouchers, they stay with properties.
Right.
The HCB, we do not,
Mhm.
we only budget against the tax credit round. So I don't budget unless their potential, no, I shouldn't say potential, that's my report language. The current rent is currently lower. Then I do the 5% off that.
Okay.
So, because if they're not at the tax credit rent, then I'm budgeting too much, if they're not there yet.
Okay.
So then we go into the suites.
But yes, theoretically, yes, over time,
Mhm.
as rents increase and you're moving up, then if they don't increase the dollar value they're giving to us for vouchers, then yes, that actually starts reducing the number of vouchers.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And for a long time, we weren't actually asking for additional federal assistance.
Right.
So we're still playing catch up.
Right, that's the problem, yeah. We're not eight ball at the time, yeah.
Yeah,
right
we're
now,
still
yeah.
playing catch up. So for the suites, this is the same situation. The suites, their entire portfolio is subsidy based, so they're federal assistance. We did receive approval from DOLA to increase the vouchers, the federal assistance effective December 1st, and it's based on our contract date with them. We will be taking it to the LHA board to increase to the new 2024 payment standard, and what we'll probably do is match what DOLA has actually already approved so that it's all the same across the board. But the efficiency departments, it's a 13.15% increase is what we requested from DOLA. A one bedroom would be a 13.82% increase. Now I realize these aren't increases to the tenants, these are just increase to federal assistance. And then the two bedrooms are with LHA, they're not with DOLA. So we would be asking for a 13.8% increase on those. And this is even still below the standard. This new fair market went up extremely. It went up really big this year from 2023 to 2024. And we're still not there even on these.
Where do we get the fair market value from?
HUD. HUD issues the fair market value that we're allowed to go up to. And it'll include utility allowances too. So if you have utility allowances built in, it's the utility allowance plus your tenant rent that can add up to the fair market rent. If it's anything over and beyond that, then it's the tenant responsibility and can they pay it.
So by matching DOLA, we're just avoiding having to go back to them and ask for another increase?
Well, so here's where we, here's a big email chain that happened yesterday, is we gotta make sure that us increasing doesn't conflict with law and conflict with federal regs as far as increasing within a year time span.
Yeah.
So we just wanna make sure we're abiding by that first. And that's why we wouldn't go for another increase until, I think we're always gonna be behind because we'll ask for the increase before the fair market comes out for the next year. And once again, these are the same way for suites, it's not gonna affect them unless their income changes. Once we receive approval, it's gonna go to the board, October 17th, then we'll issue notice to tenants. Next is just kind of a historical background of what tax credit increases look like. In 2022, it was a 7.17% increase. And then for 2023, it was 5.93. So to give you an idea, last year we did have 5%. I don't know if it will be lower, higher. And it usually doesn't get released until April of the next year. So we won't know until April what it looks like. But any tenants that are certified between January and April will still be off the old tax credit rent. So if they were never increased, they'll just be increased that 5%, up to that amount.
So these are our rent increases or HUD's rent increases?
These are tax credit increases. So these are what's allowable on a light tech project.
Okay.
And so they have their own rental table that says you can go up to this amount.
Right.
You're allowed to on PBVs to go to the fair market. When it comes to home and you start adding additional funding, there's stops. Where you can't basically, how do I say this? So if somebody's already at tax credit rent and they're getting federal assistance, you can't have that person pay more in tax credit rent. So you can't have them pay more and the subsidy pays less. They can only pay tax credit rent up to that limit. The other new items, so that those are kind of our portfolio for our properties. Our other new items is we are looking to add an assistant director. It's currently budgeted right now in our pro forma at 10% HCD and 90% LHA. This decision will probably come down in November because we are waiting for 2 of our tax credit properties that have been pushed through the state, which is Hobart and Atwood, along with the 121 Main. And I don't know if you want to talk about that now, if you want to talk about that later, Harry.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about it in a little bit. So one of the things that the Housing Authority Board and the City Council talked about as part of my evaluation and managing workload organizationally is when are we going to get an assistant director position to help Molly and I kind of move through some of this stuff. So what we were looking at is when we look at our fund balances, we historically have been somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 1.7 to 2 million. When we project our fund balances out over the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to be close to 3 to 3.3 million based on the work that we've been doing. We also know that we have 2 tax credit projects in the hopper, and we have a potential project in the Middle Income Housing Authority. So I probably need to go there and just we need to talk about that as it relates to the budget. So the Middle Income Housing Authority is a new, you all may have heard about it. It's a new state initiative where they have a state housing authority that focuses on middle income housing. And primarily that's 80 to 120% AMI that they're looking at. And so we had a project at 121 Main submit to go into that process. And they initially approached us about taking on a management role on that project. When we initially looked at it, it didn't look like it matched what we were doing. Also from a staffing perspective, we were like, oh boy, here we go. Can we handle another one? And we're like, not so interested in this. As it went through the process, there is a provision within the statute from the Middle Income Housing Authority. Once they make it to a certain point, they notify the governmental agencies and say, are you willing to support this or do you want to veto it? It's kind of odd because you don't have a chance to negotiate anything in terms of what you're doing. With the state rules, it continues to change, evolve, even as we're trying to evaluate it. So we ended up going to the city council and talking about this in executive session because it's actually a city council decision, not a housing authority decision. So we went through and had some conversations. We also had conversations with the state, and they agreed to give us some more time based on some concerns that we had with the way the program was designed and what they were asking us to commit to. And so we have now until November 15th to make a decision. Essentially the deal is this, because they're higher income rents on this property, the state actually wants housing authorities to be the managers. And we didn't know that originally, no one told us that, but we want housing authorities to manage it, and we would like to see housing authorities partner in this program in some way. So what's on the table for us in managing that project is $200,000 a year management fee, plus all of the staffing expenses for the property itself. So you're not having to pull into your management fee to get the staffing costs for the facility. So when I heard that, I was like, much to Molly's chagrin at a point, I'm like,
Yours great.
I'm like, I don't think we can turn this down because that's a significant operating revenue stream coming in on an ongoing basis. In addition, we're also talking to them, well, it's not technically a special limited partnership fee. We can ask for that. And so we're in negotiations right now. But the point on that project is if it makes it through the Middle Income Housing Authority and we actually become the manager, then that lets us fill some of the staffing needs that we have with that $200,000 management fee. And then even in the operational costs of the property itself, I think we could look within the operating budget and actually assign part of Kendra's cost to that and start bringing additional revenue sources in to offset existing costs that we're absorbing and pulling in $200,000, which builds the capacity. So when we were looking at that, it made sense with that project and the ones that we have in the tax credit process to go ahead and look at maybe drawing down on fund balance for a year or two to get the position started. And then know that the backfill is going to come on an ongoing basis with these other projects. And so Kendra's point of it may wait a little bit, we need to really wait and see if this happens and if this happens. And if not, there's some other things that we can look at from the city side. But part of the need for the assistant director is we did something very similar on the city side in terms of having staff. So on the affordable and attainable housing funds, we actually went from 10% being allowed for administrative expenses to 20%, so we could add additional staff to start really digging into the state funding. We know we're really competitive. We've already received $1.8 million on an affordable and attainable housing project. Our challenge is we just don't have the staff to do it. And so the city's already putting in an additional 10% for those funds. And when we look at all of these positions are sort of tied in with this concept, but some not as directly. The other thing that the city, that we got direction on in the budget, so it's moving forward, is with about 50% of our marijuana funding, we're actually going to create two clinician positions, mental health clinicians that will be housed at the suites. But we're working on a broader center of excellence team with our public safety, senior, and youth and family services, where they're not only going to support the suites, they're going to support other areas of the community when we talk about our in-house community and other challenges. And then when you see the clinician one here, because of some of these other changes, the suites will actually also fund a clinician one out of their budget on that property that's permanently dedicated there, which gives us more capacity with the two from the city funding side. So in terms of mental health services, next year we'll put 3 clinicians in the mix for all of our properties in the community, adding to the resources that we have in League Core, which we think is a game changer for us, not only for housing, for all of our housing units, but for the community in general. So they're all connected into this equation. And so what we would do, the clinician ones, specifically the suites, the resource specialist, the 60% LHA funded is kind of connected to this, but we think we do have the ongoing funding. But the assistant director is really somewhat dependent on these other projects, but I think something we need so that we can focus on, so that Molly and I can really focus on the development side. Because we've now, in terms of looking at the fund balance and our pro forma on the development side, we now know what the cycle needs to be in terms of development in order to continue to add to the fund balance. And if we don't have that capacity, then we're just in danger of going back to where we were before. And the vision is this really takes a lot of the operational pieces, and we can focus on the development and really the high level work that we need to be given.
So currently, does the budget then include
Yeah.
the middle income?
In the projections.
Yeah.
It will go to council with the assistant director in there, with the caveat that, if these projects move forward, we can move forward with that piece of it.
The big thing with the state and the middle income housing authority was really certainty in terms of what does that mean, and if you sell it, how do we know we're going to continue to be able to be the property manager? And so those are things that we have to negotiate both with the developer and with the state. So that's really the time that we have to spend over the next couple of weeks, kind of again to the point, what do we need to work on and need relief on the assistant director side. But we also learned in this that an application stronger if the housing authority has an ownership interest. And so, we'll try and negotiate an ownership interest for no financial contribution in order to make the project stronger, in addition to getting this, which then starts giving us the long-term security that we need. So I think that meeting's tomorrow.
Yeah, the first of several.
The first of several tomorrow. So it'll be interesting. There's some other things in the state statute that we have to figure out because it's 80 to 120. They're being a stickler to, on overall. So I think the unit mix on this project is coming in just under 80% AMI, which will be interesting. Where it matches what we're doing a little bit is there will be some 50% AMI units in there and some 70%. So think of income averaging.
So we're hoping for at least.
When you think of this. But it's highly likely that the state's going to go, well, no, your average needs to be 80. But it doesn't match with another section in the statute that says if your community has a housing needs analysis, you need to be within the housing needs analysis. And so, admittedly, I think the governor's putting a lot of pressure on 2 staff members in the Middle Income Housing Authority Board to move very quickly through this. And they've admitted their building and plans are flying. And so the good news is for us is I think we're helping building the plane because in the meeting that we had with them, it was like, oh, this is really good. I need this feedback for the program. Oh, this is really good. And so I think the good news is even if it doesn't work, we're actually in a position to help shape the program. So it'll just be a fair amount of work, but we do think it's an opportunity based on the revenue stream that's going to come in. And the other challenge for the council is they get a property tax exemption, which is where we kind of look at, well, what does that mean? But when we ran the numbers and we look at the value that we're getting, it works itself out because what it does is it bolsters the revenue stream of the housing authority, which means that we don't have to put as much general fund dollars to come over. And so at the end of the day, if we can get the long-term security, it does make sense financially for the city and for the housing authority.
So to tack onto that, well, the reason the budget piece is one reason this is on the agenda, and also that by November 15th, we're going to be trying to negotiate something that includes the housing authority. And just to make sure you all know that this is kind of a move and it's kind of like the world is taking us into this business direction. We're already touching 80% units because of income averaging, so we're already basically there. But this is different. This is not income averaging. We're not getting 80% units because we're also getting 30% units. It's kind of all 80. And our housing needs assessment tells us that new build market rentals are 70 to 90% AMI. So that was the initial concern is, why would we want a property tax exempt on something that's essentially market rate here? Now that's today's scenario. Long-term, having something set at 80% might be really great, for the future. That's what we anticipated.
Yeah, because you have to income qualify.
Right, you have to be income qualified, so it'll be still stable and not subject to the rent increases that would go around it. But for the housing authority side, what the board would likely end up considering is like an LOI from the developer to see what that goes into all of these aspects on the management side. But also, we're moving into a new realm of middle income, which is a weird word for Longmont right now because that's not really middle income. It will be someday. Really, this program, I think, was designed for mountain communities, and we didn't expect anyone in Longmont to apply, but they did, and they got preliminarily selected. So we're just going to keep going and ride it out and see what we can manage to get for community benefit out of it. But that's what the board would consider is A, this development partnership, and B, the general direction of where this is going.
Well, one of the things I didn't think about,
Bring forward.
when you have to income qualify, when it's set at 80% AMI, one of the things that we've seen now in 2 housing studies in Longmont is there's also a gap in units above market. And so we do know from 2 housing studies that people that can actually pay more rent are actually going into the 70 to 90% range. And so what it's doing is starting to push the market in a different direction. And so the fact that they're income qualified and it's 80% means I couldn't come in and rent a unit out from under somebody who is at 85% AMI. And that was something that we never talked about, but it's really there because we know that's happening.
It's kind of like the California effect on housing in Boulder.
Right.
They come from California and say, oh, $1.2 million, this is a steal.
This is cheap.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
That's yours.
Regular people who are like, I can barely make $1.2 million no longer have that option.
Yeah, no, we're dealing with the same thing.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the long game.
Yeah.
I think it'd be nice for people who know that their rent's not gonna be jacked up in an enormous amount. They can have some stability.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's 200 units. We should have said that. It's the
It's
biggest.
200
It's a
units.
big property for LHA.
And when is this is moving along, the project already, so when is it likely to be built and start to be rented out?
If they get through the MEHA project, this is similar to Atwood. So if you remember Atwood that we talked to you all about, where it started off as a market rate project, and then because of financing and everything else, they pivoted and went into the LIHTC world. This is the same way. It's a project that they've been working on for a while. So in terms of design and entitlements, they're down the road. But because of the same financing issues, they said, let's try for MEHA to see if we can go into this project. And so I would assume if they get through it in probably 6 months to finish the entitlements and the review, it's possible 3rd quarter, 4th quarter of next year, because they have most of the designs and architectural work done. There's some things we've got to figure out in terms of ground floor commercial and what that looks like. To the broader downtown development, we see the tension in what they want, but if you also bring 200 units downtown that's state supported, then when we look at things like the First and Main Transit Station and the steam area off of First and Main, that actually starts positioning it a little differently for commercial to come in, because right now we just don't have enough volume of people to really bring commercial, but we think that between that and South Main Station, we could really change the commercial profile of Main Street. So a lot of moving parts.
So Harold, finance is not my strong suit. If this is all property tax free. No one heard. How does the city absorb that loss?
Well, I think generally when we look at this, we're estimating $300,000 to maybe $500,000 in value. Not 3 to 500, 3 to 400
Annually.
And so when I talked about the fact that if you're pulling $200,000 into the housing authority on an annual basis, and you look at what we can get out of the staffing, that actually creates a direct revenue stream into the housing world that as we get pushed, it relieves the pressure on the city side via affordable, attainable, or even general fund, and having to push more of that money over into housing, so it balances out a little bit. I think when we look at just growth in property tax that is naturally occurring, we're not really seeing an issue. Then when you look at most of the services that will be impacted like this, and you think about public safety, because we have the public safety sales tax, which is sales tax driven, when you bring 200 units in and they're contributing to the sales tax, then that will drive that component a different way. And then everything else that would traditionally be impacted by this is fees. So when we look at our utility funds and other things, the ROI on dense multifamily units is much greater than single family units in terms of what revenue streams you're bringing into your utilities. So in many ways, I think we actually come out ahead, but for the property tax. And if it can spur other development that is taxed, because you're bringing people in, so think of a neighborhood grocery store that everybody wants in the downtown area, but you don't have enough people that live in downtown to justify it. If that can create that kind of mechanism, then that's going to change the property tax profile there.
So this is gonna open up housing for people coming into the city, opposed to the current
Both?
environment?
So location wise, because I'm trying to picture Main Street.
Cheese importers?
She's in, like,
Right
next
next
door
to
to
us.
us.
Yeah, next door to the cheese importers and that empty parking lot.
Okay. Got it.
So generally, this is not, that now the budget side is here, but on the other
Yeah.
side, if the board was gonna be considering, this business model, would want to know what your thoughts are in terms of advising the board on the business model too.
But it's connected to a budget.
Yeah, so it's all kind of mixed up, but
All forward, if, again, if it provides administrative fee, it's kind of a no-brainer. If they're covering the salaries as well, we get to see it, like you said, it's, yeah, we got the property tax exemption, but it's already kind of funding the LHA for future years as well. And then on the assistant director side too, so they'll be handling more of the operational type piece as well, and then you guys will be more strategic in development side.
Yeah.
It's like which I'm all for as well.
we have potentially 3 projects under consideration at kind of the same time. And if so, we gotta ramp up operations generally.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, like in the last, Eric has been dealing with a lot of this, like in the last week or so, the train of people that have been coming in to our office about different issues, and many of them are pretty straightforward, but then taking the time to sit down and work, explain it, and deal with it. What we're starting to see is it's starting to snowball, because then, depending on what it is, then it's Eric and getting with Molly, or Eric and getting with Lisa, or Sarah, or myself. I'll take some of those, depending on the nature of it. Molly takes some of them. And so just having somebody that can sort of be that central point, work with the property managers, take that load, then you can see how it starts freeing everyone else up, or even the council's had a few calls recently, and it just starts eating our time. And and you have to deal with those issues, and then when you have this other stuff on top of it, it does become a bit of a train wreck. And at the end of the day, for me, it's also keeping these folks sane, because I also know there's a, not that they'd ever say it, but I also know there's a breaking point to individuals when you're starting to handle way too much, and we've got to bring some sanity into everybody's work-life balance, because right now, most of these folks are not in balance.
So maybe this is my question, but it seems like you guys, can definitely use a lot more operational help. If the assistant director is kind of tied to these properties, do you actually think that's going to be enough? Or are they going to have some flexibility to handle operational concerns, maybe more broadly? Does that make sense? I'm sorry, I'm just saying it looks like the assistant director would be targeted for Maine, Ascent, and Atwood, right?
I think that's what
Or no?
funding source.
No,
sorry,
it's a
that's
funding
okay.
source. No,
If those
so
pan out.
I see, okay. So if that pans out, then an assistant director could help with that. It's not tied to anyone specific or.
yeah, so kind of think of it's here, and
Okay,
then
gotcha.
you have like Lisa kind of coming into that to some
Okay.
extent. We haven't figured it out, but Molly's made some changes where you've made them already, right?
Yes,
On
I know
maintenance.
what you're talking about, yes.
So like Molly's made some changes for the same issue. We're pulling all the maintenance individuals reporting to Lisa. We're not saying now you're reporting to Dave. And so you can see us starting to shape things as we're moving in, and really it's trying to bring that balance into everyone's life. And then tangentially connected to this, we've also made a change on the city side to where we created actually an entry-level police officer position, no, a neighborhood service officer position. We funded that, but where Sarah in the position actually is going to start coordinating multiple services that we have from an enforcement perspective, still work with the housing side, but being able to coordinate things like code enforcement, parking control, park rangers, and as we're dealing tactically with different issues, because the issues that we're dealing with at parks, we also know are connected to our properties and parking, and it's just bringing again a center of excellence model into that road. So you're starting to see us noodle and shape generally to try to balance workload out.
Well, it seems like, and if the board wants any sort of comments on that, it seems like a really good idea and really essential. You guys sound like you're all completely maxed out, so that sounds like a really good use of that.
And the other thing we were thinking about doing is maybe making this position responsible for HCV or some version, and getting at least that on paper further away from the compact down a little bit. But
Well, currently our HCV manager is also a compliance manager. She's kind of over both, and the compliance piece threads through every single bit. And Yep. And so just having somebody to help connect those dots, so nothing falls through the cracks, and because the monitoring of all of the agencies, which is intense this year because there was a slowdown during COVID, and then as they consider our new projects, they want to make sure our existing projects are solid. And so we've been audited and monitored at the Wazoo. And it goes through, it threads through accounting, through property management, through the voucher program. It's just everywhere. So having somebody help be that central cog in the wheel on that side would be great.
I mean, not to use BCHA as a cautionary tale, but I mean, watching through the years as BCHA has grown and had no compliance department and, a handful of people managing everything. We have broken out into specific teams, and as you add more operational costs, we're in the business of low rent, so we're not making a lot of money. And I think it's good to consider this middle income housing authority because you do need those operational costs to be offset. To your point, you're not gonna have to ask the city side for more money every year.
right.
You can actually ask them for project-based funds, like, oh, we wanna build early
Right.
childhood center. We don't need the $500,000 for operational costs, we want for that, which makes more sense and feels like a better use of funds than operational funds. But, so I think it's a good idea. I also think it's a good idea for residents to have a more stable ability to grow and stay in the city. Because everybody's going east to where it's affordable. And you don't want to be like Boulder where everybody's having to commute in to work because they can't live there. So I think it's a good idea.
It's probably early, but from a financing perspective of the project, how have they talked about structure and is LHA, I mean, I know you said limited partner, but one of the things that makes light tech projects appealing from the lender side is you've got a housing authority that acts as a guarantor through the construction component. You like them to be involved because you think that the management's going to happen the right way as well. But if you're essentially getting into bed with somebody on a 200-unit project, if you're acting as that guarantor during that construction phase, that can be a big liability. So is that part of it?
That's a
The
state.
state
The
does.
state is doing it, okay. Yeah, I'm not familiar with their MIHA program and all that.
It
so.
is very much, they are starting a housing authority from scratch and a state-run housing authority, which that alone, we're like, okay, we've got our vision goggles on to make sure we're analyzing what that could be. But essentially the developer develops it, the state brings in bond funds to help, which is very lucrative. The amount of money they're willing to pump into this is, nothing we could match, the city or the housing authority. And then the state buys it off the developer, and the developer makes their fee and walks, and then the state owns it. And then how that works with the housing authority limited partnership, and that's where we have to do the negotiations and figure that all out.
Yeah, and to your point, those are questions I asked, so what's the security for the debt that you're gonna issue? And, I think they floated it in the market, but those are questions we have to get answered, because I still don't have a clear answer on, it's one thing to say we're gonna go issue the debt. All right, what's backing the debt? Because, all of a sudden it becomes junk if you're not pledging something to back it, which then the interest rates go through the roof. So we'll see.
So it's not approved by the MIHA, by the state yet. They were invited to apply, they submitted an LOI, they were invited to apply, they applied, and now they are being considered for award. And part of the housing authority in the city being in support is a major consideration in that.
That makes sense.
So assuming there's enough revenue coming in to handle the staffing issues and the structure and all, is there anything negative about us doing this?
It's more making sure the community benefit from that. The first things we weigh is what is the community benefit for the property tax, foregoing property tax, and then we went into that discussion about how it comes in other ways. Okay, so that's offset. So really, it's just considering the direction of the housing authority on the business model side, and making sure that this is a solid decision to go with, because there's uncertainty with the state, with their writing the program as they go. We just want to make sure we're comfortable signing on.
Well, and I think the other thing is we're sliding a little bit out of our model in that we're moving more into the market rate. But to Lauren's point, notice that I said I need to make sure that we have ongoing funds to support positions, even if we draw down on fund balance, because I think a lot of the housing authorities and talking to some elected officials, some near us, have used a lot of development revenues to sort of bolster their staffing models. And then there's a point in time where that comes to roost. And that's what happened here. And so I think, taking a more entrepreneurial look at this, there's a certain point where I think housing authorities are going to have to figure out how to fit in that 70 to 80% world, because that offsets the revenue that you can't get on your light tech products. Because I think with the way inflation is springing up and everything else we're encountering, I'm not sure long term that the financial model, just purely based on LIHTC products, makes sense. And so this is an interesting way to kind of dip your toe in the water and go, let's see how it works. But it's a change in model.
So, looking at what I'm seeing with some of the candidates running for office, it seems like there's some pushback about having a housing authority to begin with. So I'm kind of wondering politically if this is a good move for us or if it's a risky move.
I think what I would say is I don't look at politics because, you know, that's not my job. And my job is to make recommendations based on what I think we need to do. And then the politics will play itself out. I think the answer I would say is, had we not stepped in, it would have gone into receivership and HUD would have probably come to us and we would have had to deal with it. But with HUD being part of the receivership program, which makes it even worse. And I've seen, when I was starting my career in Lubbock, that happened to them. And that's a nightmare to deal with because you basically have HUD sitting beside you while you're trying to run and manage the housing authority. And so I think that's what I would say, but you know, politics are politics. That's why we have the politics administration dichotomy.
I think it makes sense. I think it also sounds like there's an opportunity to get a good LPV out of it because they need the housing authority to get the funding through the state, and it's not a financially feasible project if they don't do that. So I guess if that moves forward, keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Well, I've been trying to make it clear to the powers that be, this is a business, and as the business grows, you have to scale, and if you refuse to do that and invest in your staffing, you will go under. And everybody wants to treat it like we're a department of the county or a department of the city, and we're not. That's not how this works.
Now it's more like an enterprise fund.
Just one clarifying thing. If this comes into play and we don't choose to play in the space, we still don't get the taxes, right? So there's no real financial benefit in the not playing in this game.
Right. Better to play and get what we want and shape the program to benefit us than to just sit back and let everybody else.
Right. So either they would get awarded and just select a private property management firm, or they would not get awarded and it would either convert to market or just sit empty for a period of time until it's ready.
And it's likely it'll sit empty. That property's got issues that I think needs the support, whether it's you can't fully develop the property out because there's a major transmission line that's kind of moving through that area, so you can't grab the density you need. So I think that property is always going to be a challenge. So back to the budget.
So we're getting a custodian, we're getting
Well, I mean, but it is good because understand the budget isn't inherently tied to that conversation.
one was not enough to get all of our properties clean with all the other new properties coming on, and we wanted to make sure we were set in place. The resource specialist, so what we found was we had already submitted our budgets for the Hearthstone Lodge. It includes a support service specialist. So we tried to put it into the property budgets and they could not afford that cost. But we wanted to continue the service for the Hearthstone Lodge, so LHA is going to front fund the money this year to accommodate that request, and then we'll see in the corresponding years how it's going to play out. And the reason this position used to be split Hearthstone Lodge and Suites, but the resource specialist wasn't the best position at the Suites. The clinician is more a better position, so that's why we put a clinician one at the Suites. We have the ability to do that based on an agreement, a 15-year agreement with the investors to not go over a certain budgeted amount, and the clinician would fell within that scope, so that's what we added this year.
And the resource specialist is a change, not necessarily an addition, right?
It's just a change in
Right,
allocation.
in allocation.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and
It's currently vacant at the moment.
Right.
So, because we were trying to figure out exactly how we wanted to drive the path forward for all the properties. But I don't know if it's been released yet or not.
I'm not sure. So LHA is not picking all of the 60% up. Some of the properties were able to pick some of it up, right?
Yep.
They weren't? Okay, so we put
So it's 60% LHA.
okay. I just remembered it was when it was 20,000 LHA that was,
Yeah, no, we
okay.
we weren't able to. It was bringing them all under.
And that's a full-time clinician role, that's what, or is it like part-time, or how
It
does
would be
that?
full-time.
Full-time,
Full-time.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Is it licensed?
40 hours.
Yes.
Yeah, it would be.
So
That's
the-
why it was.
Okay.
Explain. So the problem with the resource specialist is, and Sarah, you can jump in and help me on this one.
Sure.
They're trained in a different way. And what were we seeing that was?
So the expectation of what we saw, Valerie she did great at, providing and meeting with residents about, maybe some of their issues or problems and pointing in that direction. But a lot of times that, there were situations where there's folks that were really spiraling the day they met, and she had to literally put on a hat that she didn't have. And, having that background in, mental health issue, mental health period, she was great at all the resource piece, but you really need someone that can capture the folks that have these mental health issues and point them in the right direction, get them the needs that they need for that day. I mean, these people, literally every day is a different day for them. So I feel moving this direction is definitely going to benefit these folks.
Yeah, there's a difference between providing resources and handling traumatic situations. And what we found is the position itself wasn't great because we had people coming in with one expectation and they dealt with some pretty bad situations. And so then all of these are licensed. So on the city side, we're probably going to have some combination of 1, 2, and 3 level clinicians. This will be a 1 on site, but we'll also have 2 and 3 on site with them and then working in other areas. So yeah.
And realize there was a state program, and Molly can add on to this if I speak wrong, but there was a state program where we could get assistance to bring this in, but unfortunately they were saying you should have 1 clinician per 10 tenants, which we're not even at the allowable to even get state funding. We're nowhere near, so that's where the 3 clinicians came into play as well.
Yeah, so the 3 clinicians that you mentioned earlier, are those being funded by LHA, or we're just funding 1?
You're funding 1, we're funding 2.
Cities and
Well, technically the suites is funding it, so
Yeah.
it's not even LHA. So we did do a 5% increase plan in inflation. I did get what I could get for utilities, so those are, there's 12%, there's 5%, it's scattered. But for all other services, a 5% increase to inflation was expected. We did save money by coming up with our plan for snow removal. And that snow removal is kind of, and we're trying to figure this out, how we contract it down to the properties, and the properties will actually bring a part of them to LHA to help continue this resource, to help continue funding so we can actually do replacement trucks in the future and make sure we continue this actual service. So it's bringing additional revenue along with allowing us to replace and still cost less than what we're receiving from contractors.
Yeah, but for snow removal, we had a different budget, just to be frank. Snow removal really let us absorb some things that, and do some things that, but for that, we're still contracting. We're probably in deficits across a all properties? Or-
But we don't know yet.
Yeah.
We've had 3 more months.
Yeah.
So we're not in deficit yet because we have these 3 months planned as snow removal, but hopefully we're not getting 30 inches like Molly might be saying.
Well,
based
we're-
on years past.
There's predictions of a super El Nino, and last time there was a super El Nino, there was a 30-inch event in October. This was in the late 90s, so I just said, we know this summer was El Nino like, let's see what happens, but cross your fingers.
Can't afford that really.
Can't afford it. Great.
No way.
So we're actually not under budget yet in snow removal, so we'll see what these next few months will and then we're doing salary increases similar to the city of 4.6% based on what was budgeted last year, what the expected market that they invested last year. So you guys have any questions on that?
Does that include benefits then as well? I mean, we kind of put it all together?
Yeah, so the 4.6 is salary, and then all of the percentages are based on the salary. So yeah.
You know, we had a 5% increase in healthcare. That was because on the city side we negotiated that cap. I think that we all need to be ready for next year. But we're probably going to go out and rebid it. But
Is the city self-funded on health insurance?
No.
You're not.
But we may think about it because over time, they're a pretty healthy health fund that was there when they were self-insured. So we may have to start thinking about that.
So the next piece is the general fund forecast. So based on what we kind of forecast, we think our starting balance is going to be about $2.3 million. What you see as far as revenue and expenses is what's budgeted on the LHA side and where we expect to land. And this is all dependent upon construction going correctly, our developer fees happening when they happen or are anticipated to happen. And then it just kind of flows. So where we want to get is to a point where we have enough properties that are either in re-syndication or developing, so that you have a span at each time where you're bringing developer fees. So we're building that right now, and as we start these properties and start building these properties, we'll be able to develop them when it's enough to fund operational. So, does anybody have any questions on that? We try to do our best with, if we think Covert is going to be accepted tax credit wise, how Zinnia will come into play. Zinnia, we don't necessarily get developer fees, but we would get management fees. What our current properties are getting today, and then I just did a staggered 4.3% increase on inflation or costs across the board. And those are the ones that are highlighted in blue. They're highlighted in blue with these percentage forecasts. If they're in black, those are specific amounts that we're expected to get at that particular time.
So for you all, I think what it's also telling us is, or it's telling me, depending on if something gets approved in this tax credit round, if not, they're all going to probably flock to the next round. But we need to start working on our next project to get that going in the hopper so that we have about a 25-26 window to bring another project in. Likely that one's probably going to be the old Royal Mobile Home Park. The city has that affordable housing fund that owns the land, and so we already have land that we have for that. So it's probably going to be that area to look at a project on, and it'll also probably dovetail with the work we're doing on First and Main in the transit station now that we have the IGA with RTV. So that may be a more complicated negotiation because we may start shifting sites and other things, but we do have the land for the next one.
How far low do we want fund balance to go? Reasonably. Like what's kind of your low point that you want to see it at? Dollar wise.
So when I look at 2030, you know, I would like to see some development projects come in. I'm pretty good until 28.
Yeah.
You know, so I would like to see another project come in and us build it to at least $3 million. But my goal is to be
2.8-ish.
Yeah, I think
you want.
Yeah, I mean, because when we came in, they were down to 1.2, 1.5.
Well, they were operating in deficit too.
Yeah, so they were deficit spending,
Deficit.
and so no less than probably 2.7. But what I want to see is an incremental increase every year. So when we're looking out to 2030. I want to see, hopefully 2030, probably if we can get another project coming in, that's going to shift 29, so hopefully 28 becomes like 3.3, 3.4, 29 becomes 3, and 30 becomes 2.8.
And to give you some guidance on what actually is included in that very top number, the 2.3, normally you take your assets and your liabilities and you get your fund balance. We can't do that with the housing authority because our assets are so inflated by all of the funding toward loans, receivables that are at these other properties that are coming in. I can't take those receivable. So basically it's our current assets, stuff that I know is coming in, and then it's all of our liabilities that are currently on the books, both current and long term. So that's what the 2.3 is. So cash minus our liabilities is where we're at.
Yeah, so this is adjusted fund balance.
Yes, it is an adjusted fund balance.
Would you consider for people with disabilities in this?
Yes, that 2.3 is with the 500,000 that is expected for.
The other thing is there's probably another 1.2 million on the potential sale of Briarwood that's not in this number. And so whether it's VCP or some combination, that's also in the back of my head too when we're looking at this.
The Center of People with Disabilities
Is
built in here.
But Briarwood's not, correct?
Briarwood is not, no.
So if we sell Briarwood,
That would
inflate those
yeah.
numbers by $1.2 million, which
would give you another couple years.
then takes me where we want to be.
Right.
And then we're just looking at, then the project will just keep pushing that out.
But if we just say, 2029, we see that dip below like that 2.8 million where we want to see, so we should have something in the hopper then at least 2026, going back 3 years, right?
That's
To
right.
start the development. So you got to work backwards, yeah.
Yeah, so this is now setting the development cycle for us, which they never did.
Yeah.
To say, all right, we know no later than 27, we've got to have something in the hopper.
Yeah. Okay.
Which then lets you, if you miss a light tech round, it gives you the flexibility to get it in the next round. This is all depending on the election. This also isn't including the management role on if the election passes and we do the water project, the housing authority will have a similar role in terms of management fees and operational revenue on that project. So you can see we're trying to build in a lot of different options.
Is everyone familiar with what he's talking about with the why and the election? It's on the ballot. We haven't talked about it in depth at all here for this.
Summary? No?
I think Harold should, but
Yeah, so
it's definitely on the city like recreation side of things right now.
yeah, so generally what happened a few years ago is, if you all remember, Centennial was closed for most of the summer. We had any number of issues occur with that pool. Into life, we had different recreation groups coming saying, we want a new rec center, we did some polling. what we said to council is with the incremental funding that we have coming in, the budget can't absorb new projects. So if you want it, you're gonna need to do this. The Y had sort of floated this idea. They're actually closing on a deal in the Springs. They have a version of this with Johnstown, I believe. They're doing one with Cheyenne, and it's really more prevalent in the Midwest. And so what they do is they actually use the LIHTC world to help finance the construction of a Y. And so that the superstructure, the housing is involved. So when you're looking at the cost of infrastructure and things like that, the LIHTC helps support the other project.
Because the recreation facilities are part of BASIS, because it helps to serve the residents as well.
So they brought this idea to us, and so for $12 million, the deal is basically it'll create about 100 affordable housing units, and I'm having to be really factual here. 100 affordable housing units, a swimming pool. It'll replace Centennial, and it will also include an ice rink, expanded early child care, expanded number of spaces for early child care. And it will also childcare, housing, ice, pool, and then their rec facilities. Part of the agreement is that Longmont residents will have access to it at a reduced rate. Pass holders will have access to it at an even further reduced rate. To give you an example, we put $8 million in and presented that to council for Centennial, but that was basically taking the pool out and creating court space. To redo the pool, we're looking at about $23 to $25 million. And so this, to the council.
You get everything.
Correct. I mean, that's kind of what the council was looking at. So, and if it passes, then part of the deal is that the housing authority will have management over the affordable housing units, which then, similar to the MEHA project, you then get management fees and the cost. So, that's a potential another revenue stream coming in the future.
But isn't a land swap too?
Yeah, so it's I forgot that. So it'll also be a land swap. So they'll take the land where Centennial is. We'll actually take the land where the Y is, and then the council has the choice with that land of creating for sale attainable housing on that land, really utilizing the attainable housing program, or it could be a mix of affordable and attainable for sale. I've actually advised council on that, but I think if you do that switch, you look at for sale since you're putting in affordable rental here, you want to look at for sale here, not to overload an area, but ultimately that would be a council decision. So that's that project.
Anybody else have any other questions on the budget or projection? Have we covered then all of the middle income housing authority discussion, right? All right. So why don't we go back up to number 4, organizational updates.
No organizational updates today.
Okay.
That's just our standing item.
Number 5, development and project updates.
So we've now kind of talked about the 2 LIHTC projects. We know that November 3rd is when we're scheduled to participate in the Ascent at Hobart Crossings interview with Chaffa. So that's happening. So we do expect to hear about that in the month of November. So maybe by we have a board meeting November 30th. Hopefully we can announce at that point what the results were. And then Atwood should be at the same time, but they're doing that one on their own.
The Hobart project, so we know we went back and forth in our early child care. We're basically at a point by November 3rd, we're trying to get some answers solidified on funding for early child care because that actually makes the project a lot stronger. But because it's not in a qualified census tract, we couldn't include it in basis, if you remember. So we're having to try to find other funding. So we know that there's a couple of foundations that are interested in it. One of the things we were able to work through, and again, this is a council question that we'll take two on, but based on their position on early child care and affordable housing, I think that, well, I may not have to because this is ARPA, but what we were able to do is looking at what money we have available in ARPA funding, the interest earnings that we're making on the ARPA dollars that we're holding, which under the federal law we can utilize. We've restructured some things, and we think in that being that mechanism, we may be able to push in anywhere from $400,000 to $550,000 into the early child care piece, which then when you start taking what the foundations are interested in, we think by November 3rd, we're going to hopefully have that gap filled, which then should put us in a stronger position on that project.
That's really the goal, is to show up that day and say, told you we'd fund it and it's funded. So please award us. Otherwise, still moving on design, getting as much done as we can, because we know that even if we're not successful in tax credits this year, we'll apply next year. So we're just keeping moving, because Penrose is also willing to keep expending funds, knowing that it's a sure deal. It's just when, this year or next year, or what to do. For Village Place, Village on Main is what the new name will be. We are plugging right along. We just got our construction estimate yesterday, which was pretty exciting to actually finally go through our wish list of everything that we wanted and start making some final calls on what we're going to be able to accomplish. And it's looking pretty good. We budgeted conservatively, and their numbers are right in line with what we had in mind, so no big surprises. So we are going to get some of those wish list items. We're meeting with the entire design team tomorrow to start nailing that down. The full closing resolution package is going to the board October 17th. So we talked about a couple of those things last month with you all, the loan forgiveness and things like that. Otherwise, it's just making sure the bond stuff is all lined up and ready to go, and approving all the loans in partnership and that type of thing. So we're ahead of schedule, and partly because Katie is amazing for one, and B, pushing pretty hard because she's due to go out on maternity leave before closing. So she's getting everything lined up early, which is awesome.
On that note, we need to get together with Joni and Kimberly and the Coffin Street team. And Laura, we may tap you on this one because of the Spoke and Macon County parking is we're going to have, because at that time, we're going to have this going, we're going to have Coffin Street going, we need to figure parking out.
Cotton Burden might be interested in selling those spaces. Leasing spaces and selling them because no one's using them.
Okay.
So that might be your first. I would approach him first, unless the county will give it to you first.
Well, what I'm thinking is if we can get the residents in Village Place into the county, into the parking garage because it's closer.
And nobody uses it.
And then Kimberly can use for the DDA some of the other spaces further away, but we may need to make a connection on that. But that just hit me Friday.
It's like midwinter. This is very nice here. And loud. On that note, so we're going to talk to BCHA because we're nailing down everything with timeline. We will be redoing the parking lot as soon as the season, so at some point, probably June. So we were going to certainly talk about that at least for that timeline, but then we'll wrap it into closing about trying to use some spoke spaces for that work. The CPWD sale is moving along and targeted to complete by November 30th. We're just moving through all the elements, easement and access, and they got their survey done. The property boundaries are not a problem, which is good, because it's Old Town and everything. It looks like on a map that all the buildings are off the properties in that whole block and other blocks. But that's moving along smooth. We're meeting meeting with the residents November 17th to start going over the detailed relocation plans. We have a hotel that we've partnered with and are contracting with. We've got movers contracted. Really, we hired consultants in 2 realms this go around, relocation and owner's rep services, and it has been money absolutely well spent, and because of it, everything is moving predictably and on schedule and within budget, and it's just really going well. So, it's, I know what to knock on, that everything else
It's
moves
gonna be
along
smooth.
too. I know.
What's good, what's good.
Right, under,
Yeah.
looks like it. And then Zinnia had completed a groundbreaking ceremony since they are officially going vertical. And we're just continuing to work through construction issues as they arise, just coordinating between the suites and Zinnia. They relocated the gazebo out there that the residents use heavily, and it looks great, and it's still accessible, and everything's going generally pretty smooth. It's construction, it's never perfect. But we're doing the best we can to make sure the residents are doing okay, because this is particularly impactful for this population. And then we're starting to prep for Lisa. We're talking about security deposits and talking to MHP about lease up their vouchers and that type of thing. So we're prepping for that. And again, lease up is expected fall 2024 for opening the building. I think that's it. For development updates.
Okay. 7, resident quality of life. Anybody have anything to add to that?
So I have one small thing. I don't know how it is, so I was at the village place coffee conversation the other day. And one of the residents was very concerned that because the parking lot was like sitting 2 hours on the parking. She and some of the residents have people coming in for 3 or 4 hours to help them. And the afternoon, they're going to line with the cars. Is there anything we can do with the parking to some visible parking that we can have?
I can talk to Lisa about that. Parking assignments have been a hot topic at Village Place for a long time. We officially have enough spots. We don't have one spot for every unit. We do have enough spots for the number of residents that live there today that have vehicles. So we could assign some visitor parking. Let me talk to Lisa about that though, and bring that to her to see if there's concerns, because there's just, it's hotly contested anyway, and they are in an urban area, so that is not an uncommon challenge, but let me bring it up to Lisa and see if there's flexibility there.
I think on that, that one we want to be careful, because we know at times that we could very quickly move into not having enough spots.
Mm-hmm.
So changing it to parking there, and then when you get on the street, if you change it to 4 hours, the reality is anyone can use it. And so we can't restrict it. Yeah, yeah, and so we can't necessarily restrict public parking areas for people with residents at Village Place, and so it was never parked well when it was built. This is kind of the problem.
The only other question I have is, and you reminded me of this when you were talking about the gazebo, was I think what I heard at that same meeting was that they're getting rid of the gazebo because part of the problem they're having with the homeless camping out. Is that an issue everywhere else or anywhere else that we're having trouble with the ground?
Not at our properties. So the gazebo at Village Place is not actually on the Village Place property, it's city side. And so the city side is looking at removing the gazebo due to issues that we've had. But it would, that area would still be there with the plantings cleaned up though.
I understand what they're doing, I don't disagree with it.
We don't have a similar problem at the rest of our properties.
We do have that issue across the city, and so Sarah is, and I always forget what this acronym means, but SEPTED certified. And so last year we sent about 5 staff members to the SEPTED conference in Florida, and we're sending another group this time. So anytime we work on a project and we design it, we're going to bring SEPTED principles into play in that project. And that's really being very specific to design any kind of project, whether it's a housing project, a park, open space, keeping in mind those principles so that you don't create an attractive nuisance where those issues can develop. And so, yeah, we see it at Harkins Junction. We see it at various areas adjacent to Village of the Peaks, North Main, and so, yes, we see it, not at housing authority properties, but we're shifting into it, really incorporating those SEPTED principles. And so it's lighting, sight lines, landscaping, all of those issues, you really are very focused. If you look at the Roosevelt Park and the Memorial Building, a lot of those bushes are now gone and they're changing the plantings. It's because that was the same issue there.
Let's go on to number 8 then, LHA report, update on operations, occupancy report.
I am filling in on this one for Lisa's. Let me just.
So I'm always doing that. I'll take one thing that Sarah and I have been talking about, and it's actually this area here. So we are seeing a lot of consternation because in order to get parking permits, your cars have to be legally licensed. And so what we were finding is that there were cars that didn't have registrations. There were cars that were inoperable. In order to get the parking permit, you have to tell us that. Some people are choosing to move their cars in the street. I actually had coffee and conversations with both of these properties a week or two ago. And I specifically said, let us know if you're having issues. We'll try to figure it out. You can't park on the street because if you park on the street, then you're opening yourself up to getting ticketed, getting towed, whatever it is. We are seeing some issues where folks within these units are blaming each other, but the reality is, I think it's probably people that live in the neighborhood and potentially even, there's 2 HOAs in this neighborhood, the South HOA and the North HOA. I wouldn't be surprised if the North HOA is not playing into this a little bit. And so, yeah, people, when they do that and it's not registered and it's inoperable, people are calling. And so it's turning into a bit of an issue for us, but the reality is, we warned them, we've told them, we've said we will help you. But it's going to be an ongoing challenge with Sarah and Lisa and myself trying to work with the residents here.
Do you think reaching out to the HOA isn't doing any good? Or do you think it's, they're just kind of stonewall you or Sarah?
Probably a little of both. I will tell you, I actually live in this neighborhood and I'm in the South HOA. And the North HOA threatened to sue the South HOA because they used native grasses instead of bluegrass at one point. And so, Arlene can kind of, it's an interesting relationship. So, but it could just be residents too. And we see that all over town. And we're also getting uniform complaints from the community about unregistered cars.
Yeah, that's true.
Generally.
Too, yeah.
So I know that's something that when they have time, they're trying to deal with. What we want to do is get them help.
And are we running into the same issues at Spring Creek as well?
Spring Creek is where the biggest issues are. I haven't really heard anything. I just kind of want to generally.
Okay, that's okay.
It's Spring Creek is good.
These residents parking.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah. So for the occupancy report, overall, we're at 93%. If it weren't for Village Place, where we're holding units purposefully, it'd be 94%. We do have, you can see that the meth units are on here, all of them are being worked on, including the one that's been down the longest. We're partnering with Habitat for Humanity to help do some of those renovations using their resources and contacts, which are coming in much better in line on the budget side. So we've got a lot of construction happening, or cleaning and then construction. I would say that we know that there are more vacants than usual at Aspen Meadows Senior, and there's more coming because we've had a wave of residents pass away there. So we've got some more coming. The wait list is being managed very closely for all of these that are rentable. For example, I just got word this morning that currently the Fall River wait list is at 76 people. Spring Creek wait list is at 55 people. So it takes a little bit of time to work down those because we've talked about those challenges before, people putting themselves on but then not actually taking the units. So we're working through it, and we've got a lot of activity happening on the meth contaminated units to get them cleaned up and back on the market. So if there's any specific questions, just.
Sorry. So 96%, that means we have, or 94%, that means we have about a 6% vacancy rate. Taking out the meth units for another changes it. I was talking to one of the bigger project management companies last week in court, and they were freaking out because their rate is about 4% right now. They think that's way too high. So how is it our rate is so high?
Well, actually, our goal has been to reach 95 consistently. First of all, we do have a majority of senior properties, which do end up having, like our family properties, don't have a ton of turnover because the family, generally, they don't have anywhere else to go. But in senior properties, the fact of life is most of our vacancies are from people either moving out to be with family or passing on. And so we have a different situation to consider there. But generally, being at 96% has been our top performance, and that's been considered extremely well performing on the LIHTC side.
Public housing like this.
Would you say that sounds about right?
I think it's the overweight and age-restricted units. And I think if we were more balanced, we would probably be a little bit higher, to Molly's point. But you know, when you look at age-restricted units, mortality is a big piece. Moving into assisted living is another piece. Moving in with family instead of assisted living is a piece. So I think you have just more. Yeah, the likelihood of life changes impacting someone staying there is more prevalent in age-restricted units. And then when you fill it, chances are the same thing's going to happen. And so I think that's the difference in this versus traditional market rate where you don't have all of it and you have income restrictions.
So our eviction rate, if I understood right when we were talking, we evict mostly for lease violations, right? Not money.
I mean, it goes both ways. I mean, for the most part, our evictions have been meth related or criminal related, but yeah, if we see a pattern happening and they're not paying, I mean, we have people not paying and they're not even living there anymore. They're, you know, we're finding they're in Florida or, you know, they're somewhere else.
I'm not criticizing that. I've actually been studying the eviction lab out of one university back east, and I just got into the public housing piece of what's going on. So I'm just, these are curious questions mostly.
Yeah, no, most of ours are behavior related evictions. We do have, I can think of maybe one or two that we've done for payment, but now most of our evictions are behavior related.
The reason that got my attention was some of the studies I've been reading, all they talk about is money related evictions. I'm wondering if we, and it makes sense we don't have a lot of money related because of the vouchers and kind of funding and that. But I was just a little surprised that that doesn't seem to be the national trend, at least from a little bit I've learned so far.
Well, sometimes it ends up starting money-wise and ends up being bad flags. So, I mean, once you work through the
I do
process,
think
unfortunately.
the family properties where we have evicted, well, it's both. I think we've had money related there at Aspen Meadows neighborhood, and so I think the more family units you have, probably you're gonna see more financial related evictions versus age restricted, it's a different profile.
And when it's due to non-payment, we go through a lot of steps before we get there. Trying to do payment plans or work something out with the family, that type of thing.
Cell services.
Another thing we also found out is Lisa's percentages are different than mine because what I budget is based off of a certain percentage dollar wise. And it could be the vacant units, she's going off units, I'm going off dollars. So our vacancy rates are much lower on a dollar wise because it could be 60% units that are higher vacancy dollars. So it's hard to make our numbers align. We found that out when we were going through budget.
On those properties where you have a wait list and you've got people that put their name on and then they don't take the unit, once you find somebody that wants the unit, what's the compliance turn time to get them income certified to move in?
That's pretty quick. Our goal for unit turns generally is more about prepping the unit. The income qualification is not the driver in that.
Okay.
And typically by the time we get somebody off the wait list, the unit turn has already been completed, so they can fill it as soon as they're available, or as soon as the person is available.
I've heard of another larger housing authority that's the bottleneck for getting properties to their compliance
Really?
period, yeah.
Well, it's not so much the actual income qualification that the community managers could do in their sleep in a heartbeat. It's more working down the wait list to get somebody who's actually meets the qualifications and is ready. Because some people they'll be in Florida and sign up here thinking it could take 9 months, and then they come up and they're like, well, I'm not ready for 6 more months. I'm like, well, gotta move on then.
Yeah.
Or they just got housed and didn't update any information. So we're trying to do cleanups for that too, to just reduce the number of people we call and just wait to hear from.
Well, sometimes it's waiting for a certain percentage. You know, we have our higher
Right.
AMSA units, it's too high for everybody. So they went through 55 people on the wait list and ended up having to branch out. We're still struggling to meet those ones.
And if you take out our down units, we are at 96%. Yeah, the other question I have is, well, how soon are we aware that there's going to be a vacancy? Is it most of the time? Is it just dependent?
It really depends.
Yeah.
Some people will give notice if they're moving out. I would say maybe that just because there's not as much buzz around it, but getting notice of a move out is much more rare than, somebody passed away and then you have to wait for the family to provide possession and that type of thing. Any other questions on that?
So on that note, I had a meeting with the folks that are doing our what's the CRM software?
Yardy?
No, not SharePoint. Salesforce. So we're using Salesforce for some of our utilities, and we've been working on a project, enabling caring communities, which is really about the health of the individual generally. And so we were partnering with UC Health to try to figure out what is it that we need to do. At the time we started the project, Salesforce wasn't out there in terms of health and social issues. They now have a portal for that. And so, based on what we already have with our Salesforce platform, we're looking at bringing that in now. And what that would let us do is connect some of the dots that we're talking about. And so when we have issues with who's the caregiver 1, who's caregiver 2, who's caregiver 3, we can put that kind of information in Salesforce. They can do a release statement, release of information, so that then as the housing authority and as the city, we can surround it so when somebody has a medical issue and we come out, we will have next of kin and everything available to us to contact immediately. We'll have certain provisions for health and welfare checks. That's been an issue with the properties. But at the end of the day, to the point Molly brought out, dealing with the family connecting, we'll have all of that information. And then because we're using it for our utilities, it's also phone enabled. So the phone numbers they have with us. So for the housing authority, it's really, I think, going to allow us to provide better services for the residents that we have. And if for some reason the fire department's always responding to something and they see something, they can actually communicate with us so that we can bring in the right social services to help that individual. So we'll know in about 3 months, I think, how that's going to go. But I think that allows, let us really accelerate how we serve our residents and how we bring the full breadth of the city in serving LHA residents. But the reality is this could be for anyone that lives in the community. So just FYI, we're working on the city side on something that I think will help you.
But that's something that all the residents have to opt in for, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Exactly. That's public health and safety updates.
I'm gonna work in front of that for Sarah since she had to take off. Speaking of that, this one rolls into that. We've been working on a release of information between us and mental health partners for the suites because that's been one of our big struggles is that when someone is in crisis or has an issue, we can't share information. And so we're trying to roll out, it's voluntary, release of information process so that MHP and the property managers can talk to each other about what the resident needs. So that's been rolled out, and that was a big effort across public safety and legal and everybody to make sure that it was done properly. And we're gonna start rolling that out across all of our properties too. It's still voluntary, but it can really help when someone is in a crisis situation, help get them through it so that people with the resources to help can talk to each other about it. So that's coming. She wants everyone to know that there's fire drills happening. I saw it in the elevator. Fire drills happening at these 2 properties this Thursday. It's voluntary. I think that's something we're trying to do generally across all the properties, and that was a request of residents too, just to have more training and emergency preparedness and that type of thing.
Thursday's a bad day for that. It's supposed to be snow.
Yeah.
Oh, great. That's right.
My wife
They
told
might
me
want to rethink that.
Yeah, right. I've been planning I have to drive up to Keystone for a conference, and I was thinking about asking this. So
You driving on Wednesday or Thursday?
Thursday. Well,
You
I'm
might
gonna talk
wanna-
about it. I know. Hotel.
You can come crash with me.
Okay.
You can come crash. If you want to come on Wednesday.
All right. Okay. I'm gonna do some strategic movement. There is the city provided a CDBG grant to the LHA to do security camera, new additions of security cameras across the properties. We're moving some money around to make sure we've got enough to cover what we need. And right now we've just confirmed our path forward. So we're gonna be buying the equipment, using our grant funds for that, and then it'll be some time before we can actually do the install and then hook up the long-term monitoring and networking stuff of it, because we got to work through a city contracting process, but that is moving after some time spent in limbo with federal contract approvals. And that will integrate with the city system, where we can have a lot more access to what's going on and use it for better purposes in terms of crime prevention and response. So that's happily moving along. And that's it, because Harold already talked about the parking issues. So let me know if there's any other questions I can try and answer or get to Sarah.
Anything else from you, Harold? Update for 33
I think we got it all.
Good. Anybody have any other business? So let's adjourn at 10:40. Thanks, everybody.